Our next guest, Sandi Hilal, is an architect, artist, and educator, and she has developed a research and project-based artistic practice that is both theoretically ambitious and practically engaged in the struggle for justice and equality. She is currently the co-director of DAR, som är Decolonizing Architecture Art Research, an architectural and art collective that she has co-founded in 2007 with Alessandro Petti and Eyal Weizman. Their prized practice has received several awards, including the Lion of the International Architecture Exhibition in Venice this year. Sandi is as well a visiting professor here in Skåne at Lund University at LTH, and she will now give you her lecture about the role of the domestic sphere in relationship with the public. A warm applause for Sandi Hilal.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm so thrilled to be among you. And maybe I would like, first of all, to tell you who I am in order for you to understand the projects that we are doing in DAR, because one thing to be said is definitely our private personal life is absolutely in intersection with our professional life. We don't separate as modernity asks us to do. Our practice is really coming from our daily life, our experiences, what do we feel, how we feel, etc., etc. And this we translate into sometimes projects of architecture, sometimes projects of art. And in somehow 6 years ago, I was invited by the public art agency, Staten Konstrad, commissioned the project in north of Sweden, in Boden. And indeed, let me first tell you how did I arrive to Boden, because otherwise it's hard to understand why I did this project. I mean, I studied architecture in Italy, in Venice, then did my PhD in university in Trieste, still in Italy, lived 13 years of my life in Italy. And when I arrived in Italy, that I had 17 years old, I was told that if I would behave, if I would be a good citizen, if I will integrate, if I will accept to be included, if I would really be a good citizen, the promise of integration was that I would become Italian, right? And indeed, I was young, I was naive, most probably. I completely believed this was what my parents sent me to do, is to study modern architecture in order to come back and civilize Palestine. So in some way, I'm Palestinian, my parents are living in Palestine, still living there, family there and house there. And indeed, if there is someone in the EU, I would even claim, that actually took very seriously this promise of integration, I would be among the 100. The first 100, because I learned Italian perfectly. I do lectures in Italy. I wrote my PhD in Italian. I cook very good Italian food. I have 2 half Italian daughters. I love an Italian man. And I miss Italy way more than my Italian husband miss Italy. Yet, I have never become Italian. So in somehow, of course, when I arrived to Sweden, and I have not become Italian, even though actually in terms of physically speaking, if I am Sicilian, I will pass by, and normally actually, indeed, they understand. If I would only speak for 10 minutes, they would not understand that I am not Italian, and they would ask me, are you from the south, right? So I can very easily made it in Italy. Yet when I arrived to Sweden, and I was quite, I have to say, I was troubled with my return to Europe. And when I wondered why I was troubled, I think that one of the reasons was in somehow, if I did not manage in Italy, what I would be doing in Sweden, right? So and somehow I knew that I failed once, and I was not up to failing twice. So I was in front of the dilemma. If the integration is proposed to me this way, that I should be as much as assimilating to being an Italian as possible, or as much assimilating to be as Swedish as possible, then if I did not manage in Italy while I was young and with a lot of energy, how I would manage in Sweden, in the north of Sweden this way? So of course this was my main one thing dilemma. Maybe the second is, after I lived 13 years in Italy, we decided to come back to Palestine with my husband at that time, and indeed, actually we felt that we want to escape, most probably we wanted to escape modernity, and then we understood why. We were not seeing ourselves within this modern family sort of project where we have kids and where we have the first house and then the second house and then the car and etc., etc. The whole American dream was not a little bit something that we were attracted to, both me and him, for different reasons. So we decided to come back to Palestine. And you know, after 13 years of maybe project of integration in Italy, I thought if I will return back to Palestine, I'm finally back home. Unfortunately, actually, you would realize that if you live 13 years out and you come back with an Italian husband, you are not anymore. You cannot just undo the time and come back, right? So again, the dilemma of belonging. What does it mean to belong to the public space in Palestine? No, if my first struggle was what does it mean to belong to the Italian public space, and I thought assimilation and integration is an option, the return to Palestine showed me that I have again to build a whole new relation with the public space in Palestine. And at that point, we were struggling as architects. It was in 2006. We were struggling as architects with what does it mean actually to deal with decolonization, to deal with colonies, to deal with architecture that is built by a colonial regime, right? So it was very straightforward thing. It's like, how can we do that? And even in Palestine in 2006, this was not a thing in architecture. You know, this whole linking architecture and politics was still at maybe the beginning of it becoming a thing. And therefore, we felt that there was nothing in the public space. And we decided rather to open our own home. Indeed, dar means home in Arabic. In English, it's Decolonizing Architecture Art Residency or Decolonizing Architecture Art Research. So we understand residency and research as something that actually been exchanged or done together. So for us to actually live and do research comes as one thing. And indeed, we decided that we want to become a reference for architects coming to Palestine in order to think decolonization together. And indeed, we became very quickly, in only a few years, whoever would come to Palestine, researchers, architects, artists, our home became a sort of a space that was very much needed in the public, but was not created by institutions. It was created by two architects. So in some way, we lived these 10 years with such an agency of turning your own living room into a space where you host people. And my brother was not married yet, because in Palestine we built on top of each other, and my brother gave us his house. We turned it into residency, and we were offering people to come, live together with us, and think together with us, and research together with us. So this was our home, but many years after, I mean, we lived there for 10 years almost, and then unfortunately, Alessandro, my husband, never obtained any family reunion documents from the part of the Israeli colonial regime, and he had to come in always on a 3-month visa. So that means that each 3 months he has to come out and come in, and we were claiming that he was not working, etc., etc. And at a certain point, these 3 months became 2 weeks and 1 week, and our lawyer advised that we will leave Palestine, otherwise he might get what they call denying entry, and that means never again Palestine for 10 years. So thinking about it, we decided, okay, it's time to leave. And we ended up in Sweden because he got a professorship position in Stockholm. And in that sense, I think I had two dilemmas. One is, what does it mean for me to return back to Sweden? Second, what does it mean to return back to Sweden as a wife? Because I was the wife of the professor at that moment. And third, what does it mean actually not to be anymore at the center of my own life? If the living room, if our house, if everything was the center of who we are, then what is it that I can ever do in Sweden? And indeed, I felt that sending me to that north of Sweden was actually very much similar to when you don't know how to swim and someone kick you in the water, right? I mean, I was really hugging my own fears. I mean, witnessing what is happening up there, the passivity of people arriving in Sweden, the fact that they were there thinking that they did not arrive yet, that the fact that they were thinking if they will actually finally arrive to Malmö, then they would solve their issues. But they were all sort of things that, you know, we will arrive soon to that Sweden that actually we were promised that we will be arriving. So definitely I was dealing with people that had to do with integration. But the main difference that when I was working in Palestine, I was working with Palestinian refugees with a very strong political agency. When I arrived to north of Sweden, I felt that political agency was not there anymore. I felt and my whole thing, I knew what I was looking for, but in some way I was not finding it. So I was almost desperate, right? And I found that political agency in the living room of two young Syrian couple that actually invited me to their house. And in there I understood something was happening. And here I would show you the film, and after the film I will continue a little bit my so here is the encounter with the North.
The only story that is told about Boden is its military story. The place that meant to protect the northern border of Sweden from a potential war that would come from Russia. Wow, what a place. It was the place where soldiers used to live, waiting a war from Russia to arrive. The arrival of refugees in Boden is part of this war that they were waiting for.
بتذكر أول ما طلعنا بالباصات وصلنا لهون عند بودن، فأحد الأشخاص قالوا إنه السويد بعتتنا لعند الدببة، ما في أشخاص هون نهائياً بس دببة. فإنه أنا هيك تفكر يعني صفنت إنه معقول إنه هون بس غابات ودببة، إنه الكامب رح يكون نص الغابات.
The yellow house is that building in the middle of nowhere in Boden, and it used to be for a long time the most discriminated social housing for even the people in Boden, and that as a consequence it was turned to be the place where refugees were sent to live. You get inside these rooms, very small one, very closed one because of the winter, because of the cold, and there is a feeling that they live completely alone in that place that where they belong nowhere, and they sort of have no social life, and they seems to be waiting for that moment that they will leave that place. And you know, I feel that the depression comes out of the fact that they had a dream of arriving to Sweden, and by arriving to Boden, they were shocked that this was not the dream they were looking for. I was desperate. I thought that there is nothing that can be done there. I mean, from one side, a war that never arrived, and from the other, refugees depressed and looking for the day they will leave Boden. What type of project can be ever done there? I wake up in the morning after, and I decided to come back to the Yellow House and ask people if they know about anyone among refugees that is planning to stay in Boden. To my surprise, they told me, yeah, you should meet Yasmin and Brahim. طب كيف ليش؟
العلاقات هي من أول ما جينا حاولنا نسوي.
هاي القهوة السورية. طب أنا بدي أخذ لي كمان قهوة سورية. واحدة إلي جيبها واحدة.
تصور يعني إنه يحكوا هم إنه الجود من الموجود، هذا مثل عربي. فنحن هذا اللي تعودنا عليه يعني في بيئتنا وفي مجتمعنا وفي عاداتنا وتقاليدنا، إنه تحاول تقدم اللي عندك وبعدين إيش تعتبر إنه هذا اللي أنا أقدر أقدمه.
هل أنا بدي أدفع هنا؟
لا
معلش. أي الله. وهاد كمان الله يسعدك. احسب تنتين. لا 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 لا
ما خلصنا لا هو ولا انت.
لا 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 وحياتك الهدية هيك صعبة. إبراهيم احكي شيء. نطلع مش دافعين.
انت اهلا وسهلا.
الله يخليك.
تسلم شكرا. When somebody arrives to a new place, he's obviously a guest. I have no problem to be a guest, and I have no problem even to be a perfect guest, but I still want to exercise my right to host. And I think that what refugees lose the moment they cross the borders to Europe is their right to host.
لما وصلنا لهون على السويد مثل ما خبرتك قبل كان كتير صعب انه تدخلي بالمجتمع السويدي وتتعرفي على اشخاص سويديين، او انه مجرد انك تعرفيهم عن حالك وانه انه احنا من سوريا. فكان شعور انه حتى لما بيقول لك سوري انه احنا اسفين انه هيك صار فيكم، كان شعور ممكن انه يزعجنا، يعني انه حتى لما واحد يتاسف على الشيء اللي صار شيء بيزعجك يعني. فمن هون انه بلشنا انه مثلا شفنا اي شخص انه تعا جرب اكلنا السوري، فينا نحكي لك شوي عن سوريا، فيك تعرف عنا شوي، وهيك بلشنا من هالموضوع نفتح غرفة المعيشة تبعتنا او الليفينج روم. النظافة بالنسبة لمجتمعنا العربي والسوري بشكل خاص، وإذا فينا نقول محافظتنا نحن بشكل خاص الرقة، لها تاريخ قديم جدا. بتذكر أول لما كان يحكي لنا إنه والدي مثلا أو إنه أجداده إنه كان باب غرفة النظافة ما بصير يتسكر، إنه دائما بيكون مفتوح للضيف، وكان الضيف يجي 3 أيام على البيت وأنت ما تسأله حتى إنه ليش شو جاي، يعني 3 أيام بتضيفه وبعدها ممكن إذا بدك تسأله إنه أنت ليش جاي.
بحط لك دين برقبتك.
كان هذا المجتمع مثل مرجع يعتبر، أو مثل مكان، إنه أوكي خلينا نروح لهذا المكان، خلينا نروح لهاي المضافة، نروح تجي الناس طبعا اللي عندهم مشاكل يحكوا في مشاكلهم، بالأخص أيام الربيع العربي. فصارت المضافة مكان التقاء الآراء كلها، المؤيد مع المعارض، كلهم يجتمعوا بنفس المكان ويصيروا يحكوا ويصيروا يتناقشوا. ممكن توصل لحد إنه هذا الفريق مثلا فرحا بسقوط ديكتاتور،
بس أكرم مؤيدين معارضين مو؟
بالضبط.
I don't think it's the weather or the cold or the isolation. I believe that what refugees misses the most is finally somebody, without expecting it, coming and knocking their door.
أول حدا طلبنا منه إنه يجي لعندنا، فقال إنه فتح التقويم تبعه الكالندر، فأعطانا موعد بعد أسبوعين أو 3 أسابيع، ما بتذكر بالضبط. فإنه أنا طلعت هيك على إبراهيم إنه بعد 3 أسابيع لحتى يجي لحد لعنا وإنه يشرب فنجان قهوة. فإبراهيم قال خلص إنه أوكي يعني نبلش من هيك، فبكرة كل أسبوع إنه يصير عندنا حدا. بقدر أقول إنه هي نقلة نوعية كبيرة إنه إحنا نفتح غرفة معيشتنا.
برافو مهمة.
ابنك رح يعيش بهالمجتمع، كيف إنه أنت رح تربي هالطفل بمجتمع جديد مثلا، كل شيء فيه جديد. يعني ما بقدر أربيه مثلا كيف أنا ربيت بسوريا، ولا أقدر أربيه مثلا كيف السويديين عم يتربوا هلا، بس فيني آخذ مثلا من اثنين. خلصنا؟
Ja, du kan inte så.
Yes. I think there is more life in the city after that. I lived here 5 years ago, a few years ago, and it was completely dead. Now I see more people outside, I think.
This living room managed to shift the whole dynamics of guests and hosts. Yasmin and Brahim are not anymore the guests in Sweden. They actually, by opening their living room, they managed to regain back their agency.
Vi hade många fina dansorkestrar i Boden.
Så det var så i Boden?
Jo, det har jag varit. Oj.
Så vad händer? Va? Eller vad har hänt i Boden?
Vet du varför det var så många?
Ja.
Alltså militärerna som låg inne här i Boden, de fick inte åka hem.
Soon.
But with all the Syrians that arrives, I mean, very soon.
Exactly, there should be.
They all lived to Stockholm.
They only took Stockholm.
Yeah.
Is integration only about denying a previous culture that you brought with you? Or it is about bringing the old and the new life together? And you know, at the sudden, in that tiny living room, I felt that Ibrahim and Yasmin was able to bring their past, their present and their future all together.
Yeah.
Hej då.
Hej då.
The living room project is very much about how to deal with the role of the domestic space within framework of statelessness. Indeed, when I say statelessness, I don't mean that are only people that are without state legally, but statelessness means people that indeed feel not represented by the state or are not represented in that moment by the state or legally stateless. And In a sense, the way they disassociate themselves from the public space, or that they do not belong to the public space, or that they have hard time accessing public space, the role of the domestic becomes very important for them. And indeed, the Living Room project is one of these projects that is very much dealing with, if I am stateless, what does it mean for me to be still in collectivity, to create common places, to create places from where I still believe that I belong, I can speak, I can express my perspective, I can express my being, and I can be proud of who I am. During the process of the project, we were given a ground floor in the Yellow House, and in this ground floor, we tried to turn it into a semi-square. Indeed, the only architectural intervention that have been done here is to throw all possible walls and to open up to the outside, and is one of the corners of the building becoming simply transparent and can open itself on both sides. And in good days, it becomes a completely open corridors to the outside, and in the cold times, it becomes a square through which you see the light and you see people sitting, and it becomes almost a light box of square that people are able to see from outside and indeed interact or come in. And it has been working in an amazing way by having Yasmin proposing herself as a host. Yasmin began to come to the living room and began to activate it. And with time, they created what they called the Saturday's rituals. There is a lot of co-hosting or offering each other the ability of being hosts, because they understand that hosting is power, hosting is visibility, and they are all into this situation where they are kept guests forever as migrants. And I think that they understood that by practicing the right of hosting, it's a way of claiming agency, of becoming visible in the city.
هلا أنا يمكن أول وثاني مرة حسب ما بذكر أنا اللي اخترت، وأنا تعمدت إنه تكون من بلدان مختلفة، يعني كل أسبوع بلد مختلف، يعني لكل واحد يظهر إيش في عنده مثلا، وبنفس الوقت حتى لو كان مثلا من نفس البلد إنه أشخاص مختلفين كل واحد يظهر بيئته بشكل مختلف حتى. فهي أول مرة وثاني مرة أنا اللي اخترت ممكن. بس بعد هيك لا، الأشخاص هم صاروا يجوا لعندي أو يكتبوا لي أو شيء إنه فينا إحنا نطبخ الأسبوع الجاي، حابين نطبخ كذا، حابين نكون يعني متواجدين بنشارك مثلا. يعني هم بيحسوا إنه هاد يومهم يعني، فبدهم يظهروا بأحسن ما يكون، بغض النظر إن كانوا متواجدين السويديين أو مش السويديين الموجودين يعني، بس إنه كل شخص بيحس حاله إنه خلص إنه هاد يومي يعني، ولا بعزم حدا، بقول إنه مين بده يطبخ المرة الجاية وخلص، فهو بيتكفل حتى باليوم، بيخبر أو هاي. أحياناً إنه إيه إذا شفت حدا جديد أو هاي بخبر عن المشروع إنه نحن هناك فيكم تتفضلوا تواجدوا، بس الأشخاص اللي متواجدين وبيعرفوا لا خلص، حتى في بعضهم إنه صار يوم السبت ما بيرتبط بولا شيء، يعني في عنا يلو هاوس، في عنا وظافة لازم نروح. إيه فهيك. وحتى في رجال إنه صارت تشجع المشروع، مو بس نسائي، يعني في رجال كتير صاروا يطلبوا إنه هم يطبخوا، إنهم يكونوا يشاركوا، في رجال طبخوا يعني. فحسيت إنه صار الكل يعني إنه بده يطبخ، بده يشارك، بده يكون موجود يعني. وكمان مرتين ثلاثة خلينا كمان إنه فينا نقول مراهقين أو أطفال كمان يطبخوا، طبعا بإشراف والدتهم يعني، بس طبخوا. واحد منهم بتذكر كان عمره يمكن 12 أو 13 سنة، عمل لنا شاورما يعني. فكان هيك حسيت إنه الكل يعني متشجع، إنه أنا بدي يكون، ليش لا، أنا كمان فيني أعمل شيء. فأنا يومها تفاجأت لما هو طلب مني إنه فيني أطبخ، قلت له إيه ما في مشكلة. فقعد هو من أول وجديد يعني من الصفر بلش وقطع الدجاج واشتغل فيه من البداية للنهاية. وحسيت يعني قبل بيوم إنه ستريس إنه تاني يوم ما بيلحق معلش أفرم قبل بيوم الدجاج وهاي. فهيك حسيتهم يعني إنه بدهم يكونوا جزء.
And indeed, I have to say that in 3 years' time, they absolutely managed to put the living room in the map, in the institutional map of the city. And you see them, they are proud of it. They even began to invite politicians at a certain point to bring them in their space and to show them what they managed to create. And there was a sense of proudness of being host and of having their own place where they can invite the rest of the city. جربتوا كتير مرات تعزموا السياسيين، انتوا تعزموهم للمضافة بدل ما هم يعزموكم لنشاطاتهم. بتفكري أثر مين اللي عازم مين؟ يعني أثر إنه هم إجوا هون بدل ما انتوا تكونوا رحتوا عندهم على البلدية ولا على مؤسساتهم، ولا يعني اختلف إشي بطريقة بالعلاقة؟
هو ما اختلف إشي بالعلاقة، بس يمكن نحن اللي كسرنا الحاجز. هلا أكيد واحد لما بيكون هو المستضيف فبيحس نقطة القوة مثلا عنده بإيده يعني. ايه فلما انت مثلا بتقعدي انت تشرحي بصير دورك مثلا كلاجئ انا بدي اشرح هلا انه هي قوانيني، انه انا ببلدي مثلا كنت هيك، انه احنا كنا ناكل هذا. إيه هلا بيجوز انه هو ما بيعني شيء للشخص المقابلك، بس هو بيعني لك لإلك انه انت اعطيتيه شيء او نقطة أو شي نظرة عن الشي اللي عشتيه قبل. يمكن هو بيعني لك كتير، مثلا ممكن يعني لي كتير إنه أشرب فنجان قهوة مع هيل، يعني بيجوز هو عم يتذوقه لأول مرة، بيجوز ما عجبه يعني، بس بالنسبة لإلي يعني عم بشرح له إنه فنجان القهوة مع الهيل بيعني لي كتير.
Okay, so after many years of active life, the migration office, one of the migration officers actually in charge decided to close or to take, as she put it, to take away the ground floor. And that the official sort of narration was we need the space, but unfortunately actually the space remained empty for a year and a half. So it was a bit of not understanding what was the reason. I tried several times to ask for meetings, even though we were meeting for everything that is needed and not needed, but when a real meeting was very important, unfortunately we skipped it. I was unable, I sent many emails. This was a project that was commissioned by the Public Art Agency. They were the ones sent this email to say, that's it, we take the place. And somehow I have to say that many of us felt frustrated in many ways, and we were maybe a bit left to the interpretation, and therefore I will, when people ask me, but why do you think they took away, even though, I mean, the whole rhetoric in the city was this is a very low budget project with a huge impact, so somehow one would wonder why to actually take away the place and keep it empty for so long. And because I did not get that meeting, I think I have the right to interpretation, and what I'm telling you is my only interpretation. Well, in Arabic we have a hadith that says, I will say it first in Arabic and then I will translate it. الضيافة ثلاثة أيام وما بعد فصدقة. That means hospitality is for 3 days, and after that it becomes charity. And my interpretation is that the migration officer at that point actually felt that her position is to give charity to these refugees. And the moment that this was shifted in this living room she was wondering what kind of position, new position, needs to be taken. And instead of maybe facing that and saying, you know, this is a challenge in the city, what can we do? I think the closure was the easiest, most simple sort of act in that sense. So what I am claiming is, in that sense, you know, the position of an eternal guest, and you know, maybe many of you read what the philosophers like Derrida, that are considered the most important philosopher when it comes to hospitality. And Derrida proposed something that from the outside seems to be the most incredible thing to do. He proposed unconditional hospitality. But for me, the unconditional hospitality will still be leaving the guest and the host. Even if the host would perform in the best of his ability, he is still holding the power, right? So in that sense, the question would be, in which way we will have a democratic society where we are able to move between these power structures, to move between being guest and host constantly. And I would argue, actually, working in decolonization and colonization, is someone that is holding the power of hosting forever needs to question the colonial attitude of that society. I mean, what does that mean? And for me, this is the real connection to coloniality. It's like, how can we understand these sort of, you know, neighboring? In Arabic, we have hospitality as a verb, we have neighboring as a verb. And I will claim, actually, that after 3 days, we should become neighbors. And neighbors actually negotiate, think together. And for me, the real contribution to Sweden after living here for 6 years is to say, guys, can we think democracy from the part of guest and host, and not only to provide charity, but to actually provide other things. But knowing myself, actually, in here, I want to finish with this image, because we were a bit frustrated, but we thought we will not let this stop us. They took the place, but they did not take the project. And I was moving with some people, among them Brahim and Yasmin, looking for a new location for the summer house, for the living room. And in that sense, you know, they were saying that it will not work if we will not be in the center of the city of Boden. So we were looking for ground floors, and they claim that people absolutely needs to be nearby. And if we can put the next image, Angelica, that people needs actually to be nearby and to be and to have accessibility in terms of transportation, right? This was one of the major things that many people were worried about. But then, no, this is not the one. No, I know. Yeah. But then, you know, moving around, we ended up by some chance into a Swedish summer house, right? And I was with Yasmin and Brahim, and Yasmin made a smile. And I looked at her, and I know when things, you know, it was like this moment of thinking, aha. And she says, you know what? For this one, people will travel an hour and a half to come to the summer house. And here again, another kind of belonging, right? I mean, summer house are not accessible for more than 50% of the Swedish sort of citizens, and zero accessible for migrants and new arrivals, right? And in that sense, yet it's still, maybe, yeah, it's taking some, I will wait 1 second, because I think otherwise.
I'm sorry, it's
okay, we don't, I will, here, we are here, okay. And how many minutes I still have, just to make myself? 2? Okay. I have to come back for this new project again, but anyway, I will take my 2 minutes to explain what. So in that sense, you know, it also there is the myth that if you will belong If you have a summer house, then you are a Swede, right? My whole struggle of becoming Italian in that sense, you know, it's all in there. It's like, what does it mean to own a summer house? So in that sense, you know, the living room has been in different location. It has been acquired by Moderna Museet, even though it was closed by the migration officer, commissioned by the Public Art Agency. So all this messiness of state agencies ended up by having the living room ending in the heritage of, in the permanent collection of Moderna Museet, and also in the permanent collection of the Van Abbe Museum in the Netherlands, because we created also a living room there. I used this money to acquire a summer house. And the idea of this new one is not actually to deal with host and guest anymore, but how we are co-users. And in that sense, we already printed 20 keys for this summer house, and we are distributing it in the city as a way of what we call commoning the private. And this is especially possible for second houses. It will be hard to say that you are commoning your own house where you have kids that have to go to the school. But in that sense, and I will tell you the last image that I have for this, they gave me the keys only 2 weeks ago, and I was with the owners and with the real estate, you know, signing this whole thing and receiving the key. And the owners were telling me that they were there since 60 years. 60 years, their same family was in there, and that they are selling it because they are using it only 10 days a year. And I looked at them and I said, do you want the keys? And they were just like, you know, what do you mean? And I say, you know, I'm planning, and after we signed and was ours and everything was okay, I was telling them that I am planning to turn this place into a common place. And you would be more than welcome to be part of this 20 keys sort of possibility, because in some way we would love to have you here as a continuation of your heritage. And in some way, for a second, they thought about it and they say, we need first to detach. So for me, it's really, I would love if one day they would reconsider taking their keys. But also another woman called Mona, she's now holding the key, and she is actually holder of the key for other 15 women with whom we went out, and I will finish with this, with whom we went out to the summer house. And they were extremely, I mean, we were talking about how normally framed people, and especially in that sense female, and that have no right to breaks, no right to be out, no right to sing loud, no right to dance loud, no right to shout loud. And especially, you know, a lot of people in the public, especially if they are coming, if they are with the veil or they are coming from other cultures, they tend to be low. They tend to actually not appear. They tend to be invisible. And to be in the outdoor shouting was for them something incredible, that they say, but do you think anybody would come and stop us? And I told them, but this is really the freedom of the private place. And I think as intellectuals, we let this domain as the free space for capitalism. But what can we do in that free space? Can we prove that 50 holders of one key makes this house way more active in terms of sharing energy, sharing possibilities, being together? Someone asked me, but what happened if 40 people will turn in the house? And I say, we make a party, right? So in that sense, I miss this spontaneous life in Sweden. So how can we create spontaneous commons? Because for me, if there is something that is seriously lacking in Sweden, is the spontaneous common. And I think it is exactly from the space where people feel entitled to their withdrawal, to their individualism. Maybe others would help making it visible that these are also spaces from where we create spontaneous common, spontaneous being together, put our energy together. So this project begins only 2 weeks ago. The process of distributing the key is going on. I will reflect on what does that mean. It's not an easy process, yet very exciting one. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, really. It's a pleasure to have you here. And if you have any questions to Sandi, you will stay here for a while afterwards for some quick ones. Yeah, I know, but in the room. Like, yeah. In the room. Yeah. 10 minutes, hurry.